Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Juggernaut, and I would like to invite you to join me on this fine morning for a bit of banter. I wanted to say a bit of a... It's not exactly going to be a serious discussion. Just kind of what I originally wanted to say. Not really. Or more so banter, but the topic of which will be... Has gaming gotten better or worse? As a sort of general rule, in comparison to something like, let's say, 2005, or maybe even before that. I should probably explain a little bit my premise before we delve into this monologue, if you will. And that is, I've seen quite a lot of people claim every now and again that we haven't really gone anywhere in terms of gaming. Sure, graphical fidelity has improved, but games overall used to be better in the past, and it's sort of a nostalgic argument, oh, back in my day, so on and so forth. And I'd like to address that. So, essentially, the argument is, games used to be better in the past, and ever since gaming took off, if you will, and became a multi-billion-dollar industry, games have gotten worse in general and as a whole. So is that the case? Do I think that's the case? And can you know, arguments for both, some arguments for both be correct? Well, before I was sort of going around, beating around the bush a little bit, but essentially what I think is no. A resounding no. Now this is, again, a complicated issue, because what you're doing is essentially taking into consideration the entirety of gaming as an industry from the periods of, let's say, 2000 to 2005 and 2015 to 2018, for example, just to throw a few numbers out there. It should be an equal time period, right? So from 2008 to 2018, and from 2000 to 2010, let's say, something like that, right? Thing is, I don't think that's the case. I simply don't think that's the case, and like I said, it is a nostalgia argument, and I like to elaborate on that. First, let me put some personal information out there. I'm older. I'm not old per se in any definition of the word, but I'm older than the average viewer on YouTube. I am perhaps a decent bit older than the average gamer nowadays. Which doesn't tell a lot about me, but tells about the average age of people playing video games and watching YouTube videos. But I am older than the average in these demographics, and I can tell you that I've owned a computer since... Ooh, when was the first one I got? It's like 2003, wasn't it? It was something like that. At an incredibly early age, I had the blessing, I suppose, and it was. Usually the collocation is both a blessing and a curse. I don't think it's impacted me negatively at all. Well, almost. Let's just say the mostly blessing of owning my own computer and being taught how to use one from a very early age. And I've played an incredible amount of video games. An embarrassing number of hours has been sunk into staring at a computer screen, right? And I've played the older games. I've played the old RPGs that are oh so often mentioned. I've played the old strategy games. I've played oh so many things, both new and old. And the thing about nostalgia is, you often remember the feeling. You often remember the subjective experience you went through of something new at the time. I'll give you an example. A game that I defend to the death and still this very day love let's pull an old one out of the memory banks. Here's one that's not too old and probably relatable to a lot of people because it's sort of... I mean, people still play it nowadays, and you can find videos of it that are relatively new nowadays too. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, or perhaps, again, not too old a video game, the original Rome Total War. I love those games to death, and I will defend them to death, because they are awesome. But you tend to remember them a lot better than they actually were. The combat in, for example, what did I mention? Vampire, yeah, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. The combat was meh. You had melee combat, which was quite spammy. You had powers, which were great, and you had range combat, which was just point and shoot, basically. Combat wasn't that good. The RPG elements were great. I mean, it was a fantastically good RPG. But you tend to remember the feeling. Now the problem with it is, and the reason why it's a great game, is because not many others like it have come out recently. I mean, name one RPG where you get to play as a vampire and experience that sort of tale and go through and then build your character like that, and have your character go through a similar sequence of events that then shapes him. But here's the thing. That's not exactly down to the game, that's more down to the writing in RPGs, right? If you're going to examine writing in video games, that's very different from examining the video game as a whole. So if you examine it as a whole, you need to take a look at all the technicalities, you need to take a look at the world, the atmosphere, and then the more technical technicalities, the graphics, the performance, all those things, right? Take a look at those things all together if you're examining the game, but if you're examining the story, then you're analysing literature. As it happens to be the fact, I would say, relatively well qualified to examine literature and criticise it. I mean, hell, I go to university for that specific task, examining primarily English literature. So again, I just want to differentiate between the two things. And the stories, if you want to make that argument, that the storytelling and the world building and the stories in older video games were better than they are today, I would think you would have some merit there, even though what I'm saying is heresy, because officially, if you take a look at the criticism of literature, you cannot say that one period was better than another. That's heresy. You can't say that the Renaissance was a better period than Romanticism. It's just, in terms of literary criticism, that's basically heresy. Though there are some who follow that and say, no, it's actually correct, but they're very few. And not that significant to the overall process, shall we say. Irrelevant, though, of that, let's talk about video games more specifically as a whole. I challenge you, I challenge any of you, and I've played games since the original Pac-Man. Well, not really, I'm not that old, but basically since the very first games that ever came out, and I've played a lot of them, right? And I won't say I've played most of them, but I've been, in one way or another, acquainted with a vast number of them. Be it through reading reviews, watching gameplay footage, stuff like that. I've made it my, perhaps, most time-consuming hobby. So have many others, I'm sure. But I challenge any one of you who would argue that games as a whole were better in the past, go back and play some of them. And not the very creme de la creme best ones, like I've named Vampire and the original Rome Total War, but you know, a few of them. A few of the maybe grey zones, a few of the less suspected ones, a few of the, well, maybe suspected is the wrong word, but a few of the ones that you would think of differently, right? Think of not the very best, but really, really good. Play them. Tell me what you think. And you would undoubtedly be left with the expression, well, sorry, with the impression that they're not as good as you remember them. We tend to remember things a lot better than they are, and this is natural, this is normal. But to make the argument that gaming as a whole has gotten worse, I don't think so. I don't think so. And let's expand on this discussion, shall we? So, relatively, not relatively, I think most of the time, when people say like this, stuff like this, they have a few series in mind in particular. Call of Duty, Battlefield, even Bethesda games, stuff like Dragon Age, Mass Effect maybe? Well, with Andromeda being the... See, Mass Effect 3 isn't old, and Andromeda is very new, so it doesn't really fall under this category. But, you know, you tend to take a look at AAA titles, and these massive companies, and you tend to go, yeah, the older ones were better. It's very different from saying that the whole period was better. But what I will say is that what little sort of validity I will give to such a claim that the entirety of gaming was better in the past is that AAA gaming has sort of been, well, dying over the course of forever. Well, it certainly feels like forever. I haven't actually requested landing comments. Okay, I'm sorry. Getting distracted. It's been sort of dying for a very, very damn long time. I think it's simply due to the fact that it's been oversaturated and is just not exactly what anyone asks for, right? Name one time that you pre-ordered a AAA title and got everything you asked for. Let me think. I haven't pre-ordered any games ever, I don't think, so perhaps the wrong person to be arguing this, but, you know, downloaded, paid for, bought it full price, whatever the situation may be. When have you played a AAA game, went blind into it, and got everything you asked for? The Witcher comes to mind, The Witcher 3, and even that wasn't perfect, and people still have criticism of that, which is entirely natural again. Edgar Allan Poe to criticize is the most... Actually, was it Poe? Ooh, I'm getting my critics... Well, he wasn't a critic, but I'm getting my authors confused. Was it... Whoa, I don't remember who it was. Let's say someone once said that to criticize is the most natural thing, and to humans comes as natural as breathing. And fair enough. But like I said, Witcher comes to mind, mostly, and that's about it. So I will give to you that AAA titles recently have been rather disappointing. On the whole, you take a look at Andromeda, Fallout 4, people expected more out of the vast majority of AAA titles that were released in recent years, and were practically let down all the time, right? A few exceptions to that rule, but that generally seems to be the case. Here's the thing, though. Let's try and reverse things up a little bit, because taking this argument to its logical extreme should be no problem, right? In case that's the case with most arguments. If they work at their logical extreme, then they're good. If they don't, then there could potentially be something wrong with them. Let's take a game like Fallout 4, or let's take something. Hell, let's even take Andromeda. Well, let's take something that wasn't critically acclaimed to be that great, and imagine we can send it back through time to 2003 and have someone play on it. Sorry, have someone play on it on a system that can run it, and play that game, and ask them what they think. Do you think any of them is going to say, nah, games I have right now are better? is another question. Do you think it's only going to be that they're not going to say something like that only due to the graphics? Because this is often a argument that it's only better due to graphical fidelity, and that sort of storytelling and everything else sort of falls by the wayside, and that we've almost forgotten how to value that and stuff like that. It comes up in arguments, right? Well, I put it to you that I don't think anyone in their right mind would say stuff I got, like, what was around in 2003? Oh, I can't think of a good RPG that was around in 2003. That was Fallout, right? I mean, there was Fallout 2, which was, it's older, but hell, it works as a good example, right? Do you think any of them are going to go, yeah, I just prefer to stick to Fallout 2? I don't think so. I don't think so. And I'm not trying to make the argument that we've become more cynical over the years, that we've become more like grumpy old men, the vast majority of us, regardless of our age, and we've sort of become, I don't know, overly cynical or something like that. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying instead is this nostalgic argument doesn't really hold at all when you move it, you know, when you sort of reverse it. While there is some merit to certain games being masterpieces, absolute masterpieces, and not like a handful of them, there's a decent few that are absolute masterpieces. I did a video on this semi-recently. Company of Heroes, the original one, is a phenomenal game. And in many ways, I prefer it to Company of Heroes 2. And I own both games, and I've sunk a lot of damn hours into both of them. In many ways, I still do prefer the first one to this one. To the new one. Or so I think most of the time. Because I, believe it or not, prepared for this video remarkably intensively. Right? I've played quite a few old games to make sure I know what I'm talking about, and I actually still agree with what I'm suggesting. I haven't prepared like a proper script for the video or anything like that. I usually tend to oh, whoops. I usually tend to not to sort of ramble more in these videos than perhaps I should, but I did play quite a few games of the old games. Well, it's not exactly old, but what you would usually consider quite old games, to see whether what I'm saying makes sense to me first. And you think of it like that, but then you play it again and you start noticing problems. The AI, some missions that weren't done very well, some features that were missing and you would perhaps want/expect, maps maybe that you would have liked to see, more map variety, more factions, I don't know, just naming stuff that generally sort of tends to come up, that you want maybe as improvements. And you sort of realise that nostalgia is a beautiful thing. It really is. I love it. I love talking about old games that I enjoyed and my experience, my feelings, the atmosphere at which which you got to feel when playing those. Think of some atmosphere-intensive games. Stalker, for example. Oh god, the original Stalker. It's a fantastic game, right? It's a brilliant game. Does it have its problems? Hell yeah. Hell yeah, it has its problems. Here's the question: do I prefer the original Stalker to something like, I don't know, a modern post-apocalyptic FPS? And I mean, here's the thing: prefer is different. Prefer is quite different, because again you need to consider, like, what do you mean modern? Stalker's quite an old game. Does Fallout New Vegas count as one? It's a different company. Metro, what about Metro? Metro definitely counts as one, right? I mean, it's made by very similar people. Would I prefer Metro? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. It's different, don't get me wrong. But Metro is far more polished. I'd like it far more than the original Stalker, even though, like I said, it's a great game. There's nothing wrong with it. Well, on the whole, obviously every game has its problems and so on and so forth, but, you know, sorry. On the whole, it's a great game. Regardless, though, you can do this song and dance for practically any game you not literally any, but for most games ever. I'll give you another example, a pretty damn good one, and this was one of the first games I ever saw played, and it was a horror game. Perhaps that's why I still have problems with horror games to this day. For the life of me, I have no idea what it's called, and I couldn't find it. And believe me, I've searched for a very, very long time. And it was essentially, from what I remember nowadays, it was a point-and-click game set in something like the 19th century-ish, right? And you would drive by carriage to this castle, and you would go in it, and you would find all sorts of monstrosities, right? But slowly, of course, you would first walk in and there would be nothing there, but you would creep around, and the atmosphere in that game, at the time, felt phenomenal. It felt absolutely phenomenal because it was new, because something like this we never experienced before. No game had such an atmosphere, primarily due to the fact that we've been playing Pac-Man up until then. Well, perhaps a bit of an overused example, but you get the point. We just never had something like that. It was the novelty of it. If you take a look at some of the gameplay footage from that game nowadays, you'd probably think to yourself, what the hell is this? I mean, all you do is click on a coffin and a really pixelated, badly drawn vampire pops out of it and goes, "Mwah ha 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 ha." Actually, there's some creepy music. There's actually really creepy music in that. But again, music, one of those things that remains a constant. It doesn't get better or worse over the years. I just realized what I said. That's not true, but what I'm saying is Beethoven is going to be Beethoven 500 years from now, right? This is what I mean when I said it remains a constant. But yes, stuff like that, which nowadays seems silly, but then was the best thing ever. And it's novelty. Have we lost some of it? Well, we've seen a lot of things, right? I mean, we've seen all sorts of games come out, and to create something that is truly unique and novel is obviously becoming more and more difficult as the industry itself develops and expands over the years. So naturally, you would feel this sense of, not really dissatisfaction, but almost deja vu, right? Every time you play something. Because, I mean, I'll give you an example. Zombie games. Zombie survival games. You played one, you played them all, right? That's what you sort of feel like most of the time, especially when you see a trailer for a game like that. Horror games, nowadays, again, you've played 2 or 3 of them, and you've played them all, pretty much. You know what to expect. Back in the day, that was one of the first horror games. We didn't know what to expect. You get what I'm saying? So it's a different time, and our expectations are different, so I'd put it to you that gaming hasn't gotten worse. Has it got better? Yeah, I would argue that it's got better, but we have changed. We as a community, we as consumers, we as a culture almost. And speaking of as an entirety, not as individuals, we have changed. Our expectations have changed. Now, are they unrealistic? Are they, you know, over bloated or something like that? No, not at all. Not at all. But with the advancement in the industry, and with its improvements, our expectations have improved. One for one. Nothing else to it. Have they been met? No. No, especially in some AAA titles recently. And I think therein lies the problem. Because some of our expectation nowadays haven't been met by a lot of the AAA titles that we've been waiting for, and we've sort of quite often nowadays been disappointed by our favourite series and our favourite game developers, doesn't mean that stuff in the past was vastly superior to what we have today. I mean, for Christ's sake, we have VR nowadays. VR was unimaginable to us in 2003. I've been in 2003. There's I've been there. I'll tell you one of the most ambitious things that we wanted back then. Most games, as they do nowadays, most games back then had cutscenes, right? The big difference between cutscenes back then and now, well, I think, yeah, this holds true for most games, is that cutscenes back then used to look fucking awesome, while the game was, for its time, sort of, yeah, that's what it is at the time, right? But cutscenes were mental. Nowadays, you'll see that there's less of a difference. I mean, sure, cutscenes are now super photorealistic in some games, again, depending on what, and sometimes they're rendered in the in-game engine. I guess it depends from game to game, obviously, but you know, they're usually super photorealistic and great looking. At least the ones, some of the ones that you deem more impressive in terms of their visual fidelity. We wanted to play games that looked like that. That was one of the things that we really, really liked. That was one of those sci-fi dreams of ours at the time. I believe everyone that was of the appropriate age at the time had this idea. We want to play games that look like that all the time, not just for like 5 seconds of cutscenes. Yeah? Well, guess what? We're doing it today. VR back then was unimaginable. We got VR nowadays, and I'm speaking of which, I'm thinking about getting like a Vive or an Oculus or something like that myself for probably around the time of my birthday or something. Remarkably expensive. I don't think it's even possible to buy them appropriately in my country. It's a bit difficult to ship them in, but yeah, think about something like that. You don't look at something like VR and even though it is in its infancy still, and it's, you know, the future of this is still yet to be shown and to be seen fully. But you know, even with that being the case, you don't look at something like that and go, "Yeah, it used to be better in the past." It really didn't. Well, am I ever going to find this pirate lord? Honestly, probably not. At any rate, where was I? Yes. So, and again, I keep saying it, but it's not just down to technology either. There's different things involved. And here's also perhaps in true Juggernaut fashion, perhaps the best point to the entire argument arrives towards the end of the video. Here's the thing: if you really think all the older games were fantastic and miles ahead of anything, miles ahead in terms of their overall quality, miles ahead in terms of overall quality of that sentence is grammatically correct, but just sounds weird, so let me change it. Just a lot better than anything we have today. Well, you can go and play them. And here's the thing. I assure you that you don't remember the games all too well. Especially one of the really older ones. Let's see, can I remember one that I've played relatively recently at one point or another that I don't. Let's say Painkiller, or Mad Max or something like that. Or Serious Sam. There you go. Serious Sam, actually, not Mad Max. Serious Sam, the first encounter, and Jade Empire. Oh god, remember Jade Empire? Proper RPG of the time. One of was it Bethesda that released that? Ooh, one of their older titles, right? But yeah, like games like that. Go ahead and play them. I put it to you, I don't remember a single thing about Jade Empire. And you can play the vast majority of them, if not all of them, all of the ones that you really, really like. So I'll ask you something, what is the most played game on Steam right now? I'll answer that for you, it's PUBG. It's not Jade Empire, right? Yeah, just remember that game. It's not Jade Empire, and if you really think games used to be better, that much better in the past, well, why aren't we playing them? Right? There is a certain logic to it. Now you could say, well, you can't go and then replay the same game over and over again. Yeah, sure. Of course. I'm not saying that for a second, but would it not follow that if they are so incredibly better, that we would simply play them? After a few years, maybe some of the ones that we skipped out on. I'm sure there's plenty of those. For every man out there. Woman and child. Well, children not, because, no, old games. But yeah, you don't really see people doing that. Now this is coming from someone who played Oblivion on his channel a couple of days ago, or a couple of weeks ago, I think. It may have been in the time, month. I don't quite remember, but yeah, so I get it. There is a certain appeal to going back to games, and you do that. But how often? Or, let's phrase it slightly differently, are you more likely to pick up a new game, or go back to playing something that's 5, 10... Well, let's start with 5, but maybe like 10 or 15 years old. So there you go. And I hear very often people saying, oh, games used to be so much better in the past. No. To that I say, absolutely not. We couldn't imagine playing stuff like Elite. Yeah, there's gameplay of it you're watching right now. And I'll argue, fair enough, it hasn't been the most exciting thing ever, but just because I couldn't find the bloody pirate that I wanted to chase down in this episode, or not really an episode, but this video. But yes, we couldn't imagine playing something like this. You can play it right now, just go ahead and pick it up. It's actually on sale right now, I think, with the DLC. We used to play X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. I think that's one of my first games that I've ever seen as well, other than that horror game. It was those two. X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. God, that was a great game. Would I prefer to play it over Elite? Hell no. Hell no. Take a look at Star Citizen, I guess, undeveloped, unborn, yeah, unborn brother to Elite. Take a look at something like that. Promising game, to say the absolute least. Will it ever get released? I don't know. That's a story for another time. But, you know, take a look at stuff like that, and it's truly... There's fantastic titles out there. And yet you don't see almost anyone going back to X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. Was the first game just X-Wing, wasn't it? Yeah, the first one was just X-Wing, and then X-Wing versus TIE Fighter came out. Ugh, nostalgia lane. Dangerous, dangerous road. But yeah, there you go. That would be, I think, about it as far as my arguments are concerned. Did we used to have phenomenal games in the past? Absolutely. Are they still good today if you were to play them? Not as good as you remember them, but they're great. There's great games out there. Hell, I would play Medieval 2 Total War right now, without any real issues with it. And sure, I think the unit recruitment system could be different and could be better if the new one was implemented into that game. I really prefer the new one. Over time, I've sort of grown more fond of it. But that's a fantastic game, and I would play it today. It's great, but there's some of them, yes, that you would go back to. Does that mean that Medieval 2 Total War is better than modern Warhammer Total War or something like that, or the new Medieval Total War that might come out eventually? No. No. This follows the same for pretty much every genre of video game. It doesn't mean that one is worse than the other, or one is terrible and one is great. It's not overwhelmingly better. Right? Especially not gaming as a whole. It's not overwhelmingly better in the past. Because even if it is, well, go play, right? Knock yourself out. Those games are still out there. You can get them dirt cheap. And yet, we seem to buy VR sets nowadays. Am I the only one that senses a tiny bit of hypocrisy in that? No? Something to think about. But at any rate, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. I believe this is everything I have on the subject so far. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think. Do you agree with me? Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm absolutely wrong and being stupid? I would like to hear. I would like to hear from you. And I'm quite interested in hearing what you have to say and whether you think what, right or wrong. Let's just keep a civil discussion, and we can at the very least agree to disagree, right? At any rate, like I already said, thank you so much for watching this video. It's been an absolute pleasure going down memory lane and discussing this, and I wanted to make this for quite a while. I sort of never really got around to it. So, honestly, I'm scared. I still am. I'm scared of the reaction a little bit. I'm scared of because this is such a serious topic. This is you are discussing gaming as a whole, and its state and the way it's been and the way it is now. It's a massive subject. Imagine making a video about history, the entirety of you know, human history. It's not. You don't do that, right? Something like that is not exactly to be done. I guess there are a few joke channels that are like brief history of the world and stuff like that, which I did see a video which was quite funny. But besides the point, it's a serious subject, and I'm honestly I was a little bit terrified of making something like this. But at any rate, I think it came out rather well, and I got my point across. So before I sign out, I would like to sort of make a few honourable mentions, and one would be to Arch Warhammer, because he made a few videos, I think one recently and a few way back when, that sort of sparked me into chiming in on this. Go for Gaming, who talked about this on several of his streams, and sort of this was never really a huge topic on those streams, but it was sort of like a passing mention every now and again. It kept repeating itself. So I sort of it provoked quite a lot of thought for me, and yeah, it was interesting to to think about and to engage in those discussions with both those people. And a few topics here and there on Reddit and stuff like that on Twitter, but less noteworthy. But at any rate, I think that's pretty much everything. Thank you very much for watching, like I already said. Have fun, take care, and bye-bye.